Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everyone, it's Debbie Potts with a new guest on the show today. I have asked Andrew Rostenberg, Dr. Andrew Rostenberg, to be a guest on the show today to talk about his book that I read a few times and could read it again. It's called Your Genius Body, the guide for optimizing your genes and changing your life. And Dr. Rosenberg is a chiropractor, kinesiologist, functional medicine expert, methylation researcher, and director of the Red Mountain Natural Medicine Clinic in Boise, Idaho. He's the founder of Beyond MTHFR, a leading voice in the emerging field of functional medicine and genetics, as well as raising awareness of how genetic variation impacts our health. In addition to running a busy practice, Dr. Rosenberg has developed a cutting-edge protocol, plural, protocols using methylation pathways designed to optimize your biochemistry, detoxification, digestion, brain function, and more. And I love his book, and I would love everyone to read it as well, so you'll get more information on your individual genetics and epigenetics. Due to the popularity of his Beyond MTHFR YouTube channel and website, what I was watching his videos when I was riding the bike in the wintertime, and just found it so interesting. And he's attracted patients from all over the world to seek to optimize their genes and change their lives, as myself. He has a lot of clinical experience treating patients of all ages and walks of life, ranging from elite athletes and children to those suffering from complex digestion, autoimmune, and neurological diseases. And if you haven't done your genetic testing, it's super easy. And you can go to Ancestry DNA and get an affordable test to find out your genetics that you can do at home. It's just a saliva test. And you just put it, saliva, cheek swab, mail the results back, and it takes probably about 6 weeks or so to get the results, and then you get the report. Now those reports on 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, you might just think of them more to find your relatives, your long lost relatives around the world. But what I tell my clients, it's really the information I'm looking for when I'm coaching people, is to take that raw data. So if you look on their websites, it will ask you on one of the drop-down menus if you'd like to upload the raw data. So you get this printout or data that you can upload then into a different program. So we'll talk about that on the podcast today. There's Dr. Ben Lynch's program Strategy, and there's a program that Dr. Rosenberg suggests using. And there's other ones I've used, and with DNA Fit, I use with clients as well to look at their fitness, nutrition, and stress genetics, and sleep is on there as well. So it really goes in line with my coaching program for athletes, the holistic method to train the whole athlete from the inside out, as I combine your genetics and we look at nutritional therapy assessment and your mitochondria function and work on the functional labs we use as an FDM practitioner to really work on solving the crime of chronic stress, that metabolic chaos that occurs from additional internal stressors that are hidden, your hormones, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy systems, and your nervous systems, all are hidden internal stressors that can become chronic if left alone. And then we have the obvious or not so obvious external stressors in our life, like those energy robbers, vampires that suck the energy out of you. Maybe your job you don't like. Maybe it's financial stress. It could be a death in the family. So there's all sorts of external and internal stressors. that impact your ability to burn fat, that impact your mitochondria. Because if we have chronic stress, we're finding out more that mitochondria dysfunction is partially related to chronic stress, chronic fatigue, because we wear out those energy systems of our mitochondria and create mitochondria damage. So we want to improve our strength and improve the numbers of our mitochondria with certain little tricks we can do. And then we want to improve our performance in our sports by working on recovery and repair and reducing those stressors. So there's so much to really training the whole athlete. And I'm really excited to share this information to you today with this information I find fascinating that really made an impact in my life and my healing journey. So I asked a few additional questions I wanted to start with from Dr. Rostenberg, but just to explain some definitions. So what is genetics and epigenetics? So his definition is genetics is a study of the gene sequence we inherit from our parents. As green eyes, brown hair, tall or being short, these genes are set in place at the moment of conception. If anything about us is predetermined, then the genetics are what is responsible. The epigenetics or epigene is literally meaning above the gene, which are the environmental signals that tell the body which gene to turn on or turn off. In other words, the genetics is a dictionary and the epigenetics are the words the body decides to read. We cannot change what is in the dictionary, but through epigenetics, your diet, your nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, etc., just what we talk about in the Holistic Method program in my book, manual, that we can change the words the body likes to read. We can alter the story of our life from one inflammation, pain, poor recovery, fatigue, lack of sleep, to being energy producers, enhance performance, reduce injuries, reduce inflammation, and improve our lean tissue. And the list goes on. This is why I love epigenetics and taking in those genetic SNPs that we have and seeing how that influences our ability to withstand stress and how we react to stressors. Some of us are better than others. I obviously can get stressed very easily and need a little support in managing my stressors. Others can deal with a lot of stress at once. And again, stress is internal and external. So what are SNPs? SNP is for short. It's a reason we just say SNPs because it stands for single nucleotide polymorphisms. So SNPs is much easier to say, which means a single code or base pair in the DNA is switched out. This isn't a mutation or a lack of a gene. It is actually a tiny change in the DNA that has an impact in the speed of the enzymes. So when doctors like Dr. Rosenberg looks at a SNP, he's trying to understand if a person has a faster or slower than normal enzymes. This is a big part of his book, and he explains it so well, as you can tell from the definitions I'm reading, that he wrote the definitions out for me, that he really brings it to in layman's terms, so to speak, to understand what, all this science is about. So what is methylation? Methylation is a cellular process that occurs roughly 1 billion times per second inside of our cells. 1 billion times per second. That's hard to grasp. It has to do with how our body moves around the carbon atoms. Methyl groups are one carbon with 3 hydrogen, thus the name methylation. We need these methyl groups to control which genes to get turned on or which genes we need to turn off. but it also has a huge influence on how well we detoxify, repair, and deal with stress, as well as our risk for cancer, heart disease, and stroke. So methylation is something big that we need to look into. So lastly, or actually one more after this, what is MTHRF? Some people pronounce it as mother. So this is abbreviation for the most important methylation gene in the body. And I don't even know if I want to say this word. The full word is methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. MTHFR is a key enzyme that controls how fast we activate the vitamin B9, and in turn, how fast we can provide those all-important carbon atoms to ensure proper function in our cells and DNA. Many people are born with a slower than normal MTHFR gene, which makes them more susceptible to illness, dysfunction at a higher rate. Issues like cancer, heart disease, stroke, even autism occur at much higher rates in individuals with this MTHFR gene. The good news is that since this gene is related to B9 activation, if an individual eats a high diet in leafy greens and supplements with the activated B9 called methylfolate, they can neutralize MTHFR problem altogether. Amazing. So what is a genotype? We'll talk about that. And what is a phenotype? A genotype is the entire set of your DNA you inherit from your parents, 50% from your mother and 50% from your father. A phenotype is the set of observable characteristics of an individual that results in the interaction of its genotype with the environment. In other words, if the genotype is a deck of cards, the phenotype is how well you can play the card game on your behalf. A phenotype is an expression of the genes, not the genes themselves. And lastly, he brings up the word in the book as well as a podcast, halotype. Although genotype refers to all the genes you inherited, the phenotype refers to how we label your symptoms. The halotype refers to your genes as a group. In other words, your halotype is a small group of really important genes that have outsized impact on how your body works. So we'll do another podcast in the future because there's so much to talk about, obviously, on this topic regarding performance and longevity for athletes and how you can reduce the risk for chronic fatigue syndrome or HP axis dysfunction, or what we say in FDN, metabolic chaos. Oxalates is a great topic, and mitochondrial dysfunction that I want to have him on the show in the future. So stay tuned this fall as we catch up with him. So I will put all these definitions in the show notes for you because there's something you want to read over again. And I think you will learn a lot. So you can go buy his book. We'll put the links in the show notes and read more, but I really think you should get that genetic testing yourself. And as he says, end of the show, you can use a fake name if I know some of my clients are afraid to use their real name. So maybe say you're Joe Schmo and get the data from Joe Schmo's your own genetics that your code name is Joe Schmo. So, all right, enough talking. We'll bring him on. Welcome, Dr. Andrew Rostenberg.
Hey, Debbie, it's great to be with you, and I look forward to connecting with your audience here and helping give them some new ideas, maybe some things they've overlooked in their training so far.
Yeah, so let's just kind of start with your kind of brief bio of how you got into focusing on genetics, as you are a chiropractor and now you're kind of the go-to guy to learn more about methylation cycle and genetics for performance and life longevity.
You know, I think if I was to summarize that excellent question, it's just that I like to solve problems, and I love my profession. Being a chiropractor allows me to be creative and certainly gives me the latitude to solve problems in a non-typical way. I mean, we have enough doctors. There's enough places in America to get your ACL fixed and to have your prescriptions filled. We've got that covered. We need people thinking outside the box about how we can do an even better job. So I played competitive soccer for about 12, 13 years, and I was just chronically injured, and it was really frustrating as a young teenager through high school, and I kind of gave it up for a long time. And I think the desire to help other athletes is a big cathartic motivator too. I recognize, hey, if I can help intervene in someone's life, save them from adrenal fatigue, help optimize their chemistry, help them see what they're doing, make some adjustments and get closer to their goals, I mean, that's a win for everybody. So, and then, the genetics came along. I was in a seminar 10 years ago and I heard about methylation. I'm like, I don't know what it was about the word, but it just caught my attention. I'm like, that sounds like a cool pathway to investigate. And I just dove in and went crazy. And then the rest is kind of all the work and research we found and all the, pearls that are out there in this train of thought and this line of research. I've tried to gather them together and make sense out of it, because there's plenty of research out there. It's always written in this nerdy scientific language. It doesn't always connect with people. So I'm real interested in sort of interpreting research and making it meaningful for the average person or the person walking into my office or your audience. So that's what I hope we can accomplish today.
Well, that's for sure how I find why I'm so interested in this topic, because as everyone knows that listens to the show since we started in 2011, that I went from being elite triathlete, top of my age group, and suddenly 2013 went from 2012, the best times, everything was amazing. And then 3 months later, boom, no energy, couldn't ride my bike. And so I've been on this mission to heal myself and rebuild and recover, repair from the inside out, but also to educate other people to prevent going through what I've gone through. And it's until this year, paying attention to the genetic part, that I find that I finally am healing and feeling better. And wrote my book, Life is Not a Race, to help other people. And now it's just kind of my mission and my purpose, as you're doing, sharing this information, that just to really get this out to people. Because why did I have this happen to me and then someone else doing the same thing? They didn't have the internal breakdown, metabolic chaos, we say in FDN. That it's like, why did it happen to me? But that's why I find sharing this information we'll dive into today on methylation cycle or genetics related to chronic stress and how we respond to stress, as well as digestion and gut health, all kind of comes what we say a lot is hidden stressors internal, but how we can optimize our health by paying attention to our own genetics, correct?
It's you've got a great understanding, Debbie. And I mean, I think that athletes in general are a wonderful population to work with. And then out of that giant pool of people, there's just that small percentage of really crazy, hardcore, super dedicated people who are into endurance athletics that they really need this information more than the average athlete.
Yep.
It's such a rewarding but incredibly stressful endeavor to go hard and long for day after day.
And especially triathlons. And if you're doing Ironman, you're doing 3 sports. And when I was on Mark Allen's elite team, I was doing 4 workouts of each sport. So it's 12 plus strength training, plus yoga to relax and mobility work. And, it's just so much. So how can you do it and not damage yourself? Because it isn't a smart thing to do. So anyways, just to stay on topic, can we go into the basics of genetics, the methylation, what it is, and MTHFR is somewhere to get started, and kind of if we can touch a little bit as well when you start going to this defining what it is and the SNPs, and if people aren't familiar with that.
Okay, that's an excellent set of questions there. And I think one of the ironic things about this methylation science is when you first look at it, it sounds like an abbreviation for something your mom would make you wash your mouth out with soap for, right? MTHFR, what are we trying to not say here? And we joke about that with patients. It's kind of ironic. That's how science named this. But looking at it from the big picture point of view, what's valuable about methylation is that it's everywhere in your body. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's not like the process of digestion, although that's important. It really only happens in your gut or the kidney function or liver. By looking at methylation, you're looking across the whole landscape of the biochemistry in your body. It's going to be a player in every process. There's one big advantage to looking at this from a health point of view is when you figure these things out and you help to optimize yourself, you have this leverage where if you get this one simple thing fixed, it just cascades across all these systems and everything increases its function. That's one of the main reasons I think that I like the process to study it and to use it clinically. But methylation as a word, you go back to organic chemistry, a methyl group is one carbon atom. Then you have, methane, butane, propane, octane. We all learned that at some point. Most of us did, although it's been a while for some of us, right? It's talking about the movement of carbon. Okay, so we're carbon-based organisms, and methylation is, strictly definition of like, how do we move these carbon molecules around? So in the DNA sense, the DNA, the double helix, it's like this giant book of instructions. And what methylation allows you to do, it's like your body grabs another sheet of paper and it covers the words it doesn't want to read so that when the machine goes over the DNA, it just reads the happy song about a sunny, bright day with a rainbow instead of the song talking about cancer and, negative health effects, for example. So that's a big player too. So methylation, it affects the genetic expression of our genes. So it's like that right there, we could spend a month just talking about that one idea. But from the athletic point of view, methylation, again, we're talking about one carbon atom. It's kind of this idea of how fast can we move these atoms around. So using the example of DNA, and most of the research that's out there, the consensus is that cancer, for example, will start when the gene in our cells that's the cancer gene, when it loses the methylation, covering the top hat, the lid is taken off of that gene, then that gene will more likely turn on and then become a problem. So methylation helps control genetic expression that way. When the methyl group is on the DNA, you get that DNA, that gene itself doesn't turn on, but if the methyl group doesn't show up, then the gene will turn on. So that's kind of the cancer concept. But again, for athletics, when you train hard, when you're sweating, when you're laser focused on your goal and you're putting in double-digit hours a week, you're doing 2-a-days, maybe you're doing 9 workouts a week, as you were doing, Debbie, even more than that possibly, your need for nutrition is phenomenally high. And that's not always appreciated by athletes, especially younger, immature ones. They've always gotten by on their youth, maybe. Mm-hmm. So the methylation cycle becomes very important for athletes because just like chromium, just like iron, just like glucose and glycogen, everything your body needs for optimum performance, the level that you need to take into your body goes up the harder you train. And I didn't know that as an immature teenager. And if I could go back and fix it, I'd have had a different experience. But I think we can both agree that's true, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's learning how important nutrition is, but also digestion and absorption I was talking about, but also the nutrients that we need to help our recovery repair and how genetics is a part of that. So you have a great chapter I love because in nutritional therapy as a practitioner, and I'm studying to become an FDN practitioner right now, that you say health begins in the stomach, and the whole stomach acid, digestive enzymes, so much of that is so essential to, what we eat is important, but how we're digesting, and then how genetics can impact that ability to get the nutrients from the food that we need to fuel our mitochondria and help our performance and longevity.
Someone with methylation issues. So now we've kind of barely touched on what methylation is. And again, it's like this economy. Your body has to shuttle carbon around quickly. It needs more methyl groups in the liver to help detox estrogen. It needs to get more methyl groups up into the brain to help the frontal lobe fire the dopamine pathway. It needs, methyl groups to help produce a neurotransmitter. So it's always using this stuff. I mean, the doctor I've learned the most from is Dr. Rakowski, and he's kind of a peer with like Paul Chek and a lot of these other people. He's an excellent clinician. And he would always quote in his seminars that we methylate about 1 billion times a second. So I can't really wrap, my head around that. I just think, wow, it's happening really fast. So if you become deficient in the availability, if your bioavailability of methyl groups of a carbon atom with 3 hydrogens stuck on it, if you can't make those available fast enough, your chemistry will slow down. Mm-hmm. Like in the beginning when I said, the cool thing about methylation is it's everywhere. Well, it's also the bad thing about it, because if it slows down, it slows everything down. So from the athletic point of view, the stresses placed on your body during endurance racing is unique. And one of the big problems you have with digestion, as you said, that's affected by genetics is if you become hypoglycemic, which most people are during a long race, you shut off stomach function. I kind of explain that in the book, but I think it's important people know about glucagon, because they need to know, everybody knows about insulin, but they don't know that much about glucagon. And athletes have to manage this. But the reason one athlete crashes, you did ask this question earlier, so I thought I'll do my best to stay focused on that for a minute. The reason one athlete crashes in a peer group where the training is equal across the group, that's kind of the canary in the coal mine. And those people who have inherited genetic SNPs, we call them, which is an abbreviation for single nucleotide polymorphism. So we can all agree SNP's a better way to say it.
I was just going to say that. SNPs, yes.
Yeah, that's a little nicer. Those who have inherited the SNPs in MTHFR pathways, they're the ones who become the canary in the coal mine. And I can expand on that idea for a little bit just to kind of help.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So the body has to adapt. The nature of health is sort of this concept of balance. We could say it's well adjusted. It's well adapted to the stresses. Going outside, inhaling diesel fumes, you're going to get some of that. You live in a city. You may live in the country. You may have Roundup and GMO crop sprayers coming around you. You have to deal with that stress. There's thousands of stressors. We don't really notice them because our body can adapt. Those of us with MTHFR issues, the system that produces these, that runs the methylation cycle isn't stuck at 0%, but it's not going 100% either. And really what happens is it's like a biochemical bottleneck. And one way I describe it is I spent some time in my earlier years kayaking. I grew up in the Ozark Mountains, and creek boating is a fun way to get outside. So if you have enough water, and you may have a super rocky creek, if there's enough water, you can run the creek. And if the water's really high, there's really not that many rapids. And I use this analogy to say that the SNPs, the MTHFR problems, they're like boulders on the bottom of the creek. As long as the amount in nutrition is adequate, as long as you get enough folate, and folate comes from foliage, that's where the word comes from. So the leafy greens, the things like Debbie promotes, those healthy, high nutrient dense foods, they're loaded with B vitamins, and they're loaded with the active forms. That's why as athletes, you have to really hit the nutrition hard, because you need those vitamins. But the problem with methylation is going to be that they're like boulders in the bottom of that creek. As long as you have enough B vitamins, you have enough water, you fly over the boulder, no big deal. But as the training increases, maybe you have children, you get your degree, you start your family, maybe you go through divorce, maybe you have other stressful stuff happen. All of a sudden, your body, to deal with the stress of life and the stress of training, it'll consume these methyl groups faster than you're able to produce them. And that's kind of the starting point of the dysfunction, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
The MTHFR gene, like a bottleneck, really what it means is, so I have one copy. Okay, so really, to keep it simple, you either have 0 copies, 1 copy, or 2 copies.
Yeah, I was trying to find mine. So MTHR, I didn't really let you get to explaining it. That's the main gene people talk about, the genetic SNPs. So if you can back up and just say what that, I guess you're getting to it too, but just like just make sure people don't know what it is, because it's like always the gene that we always hear about, the genetic SNPs, like the main one that seems to be written mostly about.
It's the poster child, and so so the SNPs. Okay, so you have this idea of wild type. You have a person who, if you had a genetic report in front of you and you happen to be listening to this, or if you don't have a report, just use your imagination. You'll get a report, and it'll have a green category next to MTHFR. And what that means is you got the version of the DNA that's perfectly shaped. It's shaped perfectly. It means it runs at full speed, all good. Then you can inherit from one parent a copy of a gene that is just one. I don't want to get too into the genetics because it's like mind-blowingly crazy complex, but your genes make proteins, and the shape of your protein determines whether the protein works. So it's like a lock and a key. When you have this SNP, it changes the shape of the lock. And the lock kind of melts. It's like melted wax. It kind of changes just a little bit. The key still gets in there, but not quite as fast. And it doesn't stay in there as long. And that downstream in your body makes things slow down. That's the big idea. It's just that simple change. One little amino acid change in your DNA on this MTHFR gene, if you have 2 copies, is enough to change the shape of the protein to slow it down, right? And the cool news, or I guess the good news with all of this, one reason I do this work is that it's literally just basically fixed with nutrition. Wouldn't you agree with that idea, Debbie, with what you've seen?
Well, that's exactly why I want to talk about this topic and share this more, because I don't think people realize they can help improve this matter, and why I feel like I'm finally better in 2019 since 2013 trying to heal is because I figured this out from reading your book and other books on genetics. So yes, go for it. Nutrition is huge.
I would fail in my task today if people listening to this heard me say, you either get a good gene or you don't, and if you get the bad gene, then you're screwed. And I have that idea should be completely vanquished from your mind. It has no purpose.
Yes,
it's not even true.
Yeah.
For example, okay, we've talked about MTHFR. You have 0 copies, 1 copy, or 2 copies. The rotten deck of cards, the bad hand at poker would be 2 copies. The kind of bad one would be 1 copy, and the great hand would be having no copies. Okay. But think about this. In the country of Italy, the latest numbers show that on average, out of however, 60, 80 million people are in Italy, 18% of them have 2 copies of MTHFR.
I read this in your book. I love this because I love Italy. So it was a good reason to retire there. Cool.
But how does a country with literally 20 million people, 15 million people with 2 copies of this bad genetic problem, how do they thrive and don't have any higher rates of miscarriage or cancer or any of these issues? Mm-hmm. The reason is their nutrition is so great, right? Their nutrition is so full of vitamins and especially activated folate, because at the end of the day, as an athlete, as a non-athlete, doesn't matter, as anybody on earth who wants to optimize their system, what you have to understand is if you have MTHFR genes and you eat folic acid or you eat processed food and lots of processed grains where they've taken all the nutrition out and they've put back in the cyanocobalamin and the folic acid, that's not good food for you. It actually can create like a folate deficiency in your body. So instead of eating that kind of standard American diet, and I'm friends with like high school coaches, the cross country team, and just the stuff these kids eat, I'm just like shaking my head. Like, man, if only you guys could get on the program now, you'd be world class really soon, But they have to learn their lesson, I guess. But by eating the type of food, as we said earlier, that Debbie promotes, the high nutritious food, and ultimately getting activated B9 in your diet, you jump over the bottleneck. You airdrop vitamins, you airdrop the methyl groups into your body completely. It doesn't matter what your genes are doing because you're getting the activated form. So it's like, here's the problem. your body is slow to activate B9. That's ultimately what MTHFR does. It activates, creates the bioactive form of folate, of vitamin B9. And if that process is going slow, well, that's fine. I can just optimize myself with a better diet and some extra supplementation and flood my body with methyl groups. And I've got all the advantages that everybody else has, regardless of my genetics.
Yeah. I know. And so many people don't know about it. That's why I do my podcast and closing my fitness studio in October, so I can share this information with more people and get this across to the endurance world, because I think people take so many supplements that are processed. So they have the folic acid, they don't have the folate, and they don't have the proper B vitamins in it. They're all synthetic, and that, it's so easy to get caught up in eating this processed food diet because they're prepared, and you hear marketing ads that you have to have this right after your workout, whatnot, but it's not really looking at how to optimize our health at cellular level to improve our performance via the mitochondria and just overall body systems functioning at optimal level.
Debbie, I don't know a lot about your work, but the stuff that I've seen, I completely agree with. And I mean, I've looked at your history and your even, just how healthy you are today. I mean, obviously you're doing a lot of things right. I think that there's still people out there that carb load. I mean, they still don't, they promote, there's really bad ideas have a way of sticking around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They don't listen to podcasts.
They need to download this and put it in their car. It would help them out. They could, yeah, for sure. So, and again, athletes are just wonderful patients. They're fun to work with. Their motivation is so high. It's really a joy as a clinician, because about 60%, 70% of the time I'm using my hands. I'm using kinesiology, chiropractic, AK, all that stuff in my practice. And about 30% of the time I connect with people over distance and help solve their problem. And we're doing functional medicine in both categories. But, the methylation issue, without a doubt, we know there are athletes out there who are struggling, who have chronic injuries, who can't recover, and who are plateauing or worse, who are regressing in their training. And this is the key that they're missing. We know there's a significant group out there, right?
Yeah, anything with the word chronic in it. I know you can help repair and avoid the chronic word. And if we talked before we were on the phone a little bit about Dr. Phil Maffetone, and he was a chiropractor. He's in his 60s now, and he's a specialist in the field in the same specialty that I became a specialist in as well, the applied kinesiology. But I mean, he proved the point. So I have to coach people on, if there was a way to get biofeedback to show yourself, hey, you're going too far, too fast, slow down, and eventually you'll go faster. That's a hard thing to convince people of. And I think maybe nutrition is an easier thing. I think people understand nutrition as a concept. I think it's going to be an easier thing to get these athletes to do than maybe some of the other factors that you've seen. What do you think about that? Well, I keep writing and talking to him about how you can't out-exercise a bad diet or, digestion and absorption. So I think so many people think the more I exercise, my clients in my fitness studio just exercise to be healthy, but they don't change the nutrition part. That's why it's like, can I just merge all these worlds together? Because endurance world, a lot of them just train and try to lose weight. And that's why I love Dr. Maffetone and Paul Larson. They're fit and fat. I added the over fat, like over fat and unhealthy. It's like, we got to combine what's kind of what I call the holistic method, that I combine all these different elements to really train the whole athlete. And I think exercise is still what people go to be healthy. I need to work out every day or do this. And then for endurance athletes, the more they train, they neglect the most important part, I think. And Bob Seaborn says this too, to be 75% is your nutrition to be more metabolically efficient. 25% is how you train. But yeah, I think the nutrition part is missing for a lot of people, even though they think they're being healthy, but they're really not.
There's a huge need. It's such an awesome topic, and I'm really glad that I'm on the podcast with you today to talk about it. Yeah, I think that's just such a big need. I tell my patients, or ask them the question, does the person who win the gold medal in the Olympics, does the gold medal go to the person who can work out 30 or 40 days straight without a break? I mean, everybody knows that's not how it works. You have to tear yourself down and build yourself back up. And it is an easy knee-jerk reaction to say, well, I'm not strong enough. I didn't perform well enough. So next time I'm going to go twice as long in the gym, twice as hard and twice as heavy. And I've been there and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, I had to hit my head against a brick wall enough times to realize that maybe I should try a different strategy. Right.
Yeah. Insanity. What's the definition? Mm-hmm. So you started kind of tapping into your own nutrition to help yourself rebuild and recover faster and improve the process.
Basically reading the Your Genius Body book, it's kind of like a little bit of a bioptic like story. So I had reflux for years as a kid. I never figured it out or knew what it was. I had migraines with aura. I had like a horrible stomach pain. I always had like a groin pull like half the year in soccer. And, I was, whatever I do, I do hardcore. So I was traveling all over the Southeast doing tournaments. I was going big, but it just never came together. It's super frustrating. Mm-hmm. So I can totally relate to athletes who just have the dream, they have the love, they have the potential, and it just doesn't quite come together. And so I've just been on the road, I had a chiropractor help me at 19, changed my life, took me a few years, and I figured out that's the coolest person I've ever met. I want to be like him. What's the highest compliment you can pay someone? Okay, I'm going to go do this. And I just studied as much as I could, and I've treated my adrenals. I've done yeast cleanses. I've done organic acid tests. I've done coffee enemas. I've had parasites come out. I've had so many things. Each thing I do from a functional medicine holistic point of view takes me up several steps. And every plateau I get to, I look back and go, I can't believe I spent so much time down there when this is so much better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when I stumbled on methylation, I realized, well, that's why I would get sleepy, and I'd go to soccer practice for a couple hours. I'd fall asleep in the car ride home. I'd fall asleep after lunch at school, dealing with depression and just lack of motivation. It's because I ran out of dopamine, right? I burned all my dopamine up. My diet sucked. I didn't replace protein and amino acids. I didn't have good stomach acid function. That's why I was having reflux. So the stuff works. There's no question. It absolutely 100% works. It just takes patients they have to be ready. They kind of have to hit the bottom before they open their mind.
Exactly. That's the truth. So I want to touch on the chapter 8 in the book, methylation and the stress-gut connection, because I think that is a huge one for athletes with performance, maybe GI stress, with low iron levels. You're talking about iron a lot, leaky gut. I think all of that is a great chapter if we can just touch on a little bit, but the stress-gut connection and protocol for that.
Okay. I love that question. And thank you for bringing that up. I think that of all the systems in the body that are hammered by endurance training, it has to be your gastrointestinal system.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And I don't know the name of the runner. You probably do, but there was a athlete who collapsed like 1,000 meters or 100 meters from the finish line and had to go to the hospital and have his colon cut out a few years ago. Do you remember that guy? Maybe one of your listeners will.
Yeah.
He was a professional triathlete, and he collapsed at the very, very end of the race. Horrible gut pain. He pushed through for hours on the course, and he went to the hospital. He had gone necrotic, and so what had happened was the stress of racing and training shunts blood out of your gut.
Yep.
Where does the blood that goes into your quad come from, right? You don't make new blood, you move it around. So you lose that circulation in your abdominal area and you become hypoxic in your gut. And when you have hypoxia, there's low oxygen, low nutrition, your mucus breaks down, you get leaky gut, your stomach doesn't produce enzymes, and it can set you up for a series of negative feedback loops where your performance progressively declines. So what this chapter really highlights are how does methylation and how do the genetic pathways affect your gut? And I mean this in a positive way, but endurance racing and training is really stressful. Philippides died when he finished the first marathon, and now we have the habit of running lots of them, right? It's a stressful event. And the hormone of stress that most people know about is cortisol. That's a fat-soluble steroid. But another one that's in most cases, even more important is adrenaline and dopamine. All your adrenaline comes from dopamine first. And adrenaline allows you to, activate your neurology and achieve your athletic goals. But what happens is, adrenaline has a very toxic effect on your gut. Mm-hmm. It moves blood out, as we said, but it also feeds bad bugs. So you can see these people, when people are training heavy loads, doing long hours for week after week in an endurance training cycle, if they're not taking care of their gut, and I'll share with you a couple ideas how we would do that. If they're not taking care of their gut, they're setting themselves up for some kind of dysfunction, hypochlorhydria, low stomach acid. They start to malabsorb. So even though they may even eat enough macros, half the macros go in the toilet, the other half goes in their body. They're going to degenerate from that, get those chronic issues. And so when we're working with athletes of this type, they need to educate themselves and know that. One interesting fact, they did a study a few years ago on heat stroke. So some of your listeners, maybe you've experienced it. Thank goodness I never did, but I know it's a real thing.
Yeah, especially in summertime in Ironman Hawaii and different places, hot races.
Oh my gosh. So this is a crazy study, but what they figured out was awesome. And I'll have to get you the reference after the call. They basically figured out that the stress of running causes leaky gut basically across the board. So every athlete out there at the top of their field, they're getting leaky gut. They just get it at different extremes. And when you get a really bad leaky gut, you get a fever because you're leaking bacteria into your bloodstream. It's going into your immune system is attacking the bacteria from your leaky gut. It literally raises your core temperature, and then bam, you get a heat stroke. So it's obviously going to happen more in hot weather. And then what they did is they gave runners colostrum, right? Like pure bovine colostrum, and their core temperature went down and they never got heat stroke once they took the leaky gut supporting nutrients.
Yeah, we always talk about colostrum and nutritional therapy. You just don't want to know what it actually, think about what it is.
Yeah, don't think about it. Just know it's good for you, right?
Yes.
So the gene MTHFR is a big player. There's other ones like we talked about in the book. One of them is like the ACE hardware, ACE, AGT, and there's another one, ADD1. And I try not to talk about the SNPs because it sounds like I'm a computer regurgitating like incomprehensible data, but those are the abbreviations for these genes. And some people have inherited this gene that when they get under stress, when they're in a stressful environment, they sort of produce an excessive quantity of this chemical called angiotensin. And if you listen to the name, it tells you what it does. Angio, blood, tension, it increases blood pressure. So it could be beneficial in some ways, but under the wrong conditions, people with these genetics, like in that chapter, they get the worst gut pain. They just get this cramping, this horrible pain when they're in their, hitting the wall at mile 16 or 18, or when they're on their bike. And that's because of hypoxia. It's like hypoxia is going to be the main reason why you get that gut pain. Because it hurts. If you put a tourniquet around your arm and leave it on for 5 minutes, you're going to have pain no matter what. And then that's the problem. One of the solutions in this case would be to, use nutritional components like we talked about that help keep the leaky gut less likely. High doses of glutamine, colostrum, inflammatory medical foods that we like to use. Another good one would be like L-arginine, something that promotes a little bit better vasodilation. But ultimately, you may want to treat the source of stress itself. So athletes who are training hard may want to be using more of a calming adaptogen complex, ashwagandha, theanine, maybe phosphatidylserine. We have a whole list of things that we would maybe recommend depending on the case, just to help reduce the amount of stress generated neurologically. Because if we can calm the brain down, we'll have a less hypoxic gut. They'll have less gut pain, and then they'll save themselves from that negative cycle so much.
So the stress genes, I was looking it up, but the ACE, COMT, the COMT gene, and the GAD-MAO, I always hear about too, and the MTHFR gene, those are ones that we want to look at, see if our SNPs, if we're more prone or not able to deal with a high amount of stress, that other people can tolerate more stress than others.
So true. Okay, so basically, we divide people into two different categories. We say one group of people are what we call low catecholamine. So that would be my experience. It's typically more men often than women, because there's a sexual, like a dimorphic characteristic where men with healthy testosterone levels tend to, in general, suffer from low dopamine. That's why you have movies called Grumpy Old Men, because when your dopamine's low, you're a grumpy jerk. And then you go and think about guys' behavior in general. They take bigger risks. They're quite a bit more ADD. They have more addictive issues. They do more, they go to war, blow stuff up, start fights, all this stuff. You're just like, why do guys do this? Well, it's self-medication. It raises dopamine and it calms them down. So knowing if you're listening to this and this at all interests you, it's not out of your hands. Like, this isn't like you got to go to Stanford and pay $10,000 and have a geneticist look at you. It's nothing like that. You can hack yourself. Yeah. With people like Debbie out there spreading the word and her information, what's in my book, other people, there's good data out there. But you should know if you have a tendency to be low catecholamine, you need a protocol different than somebody who's high catecholamine. And I would say in general, and this is what the research shows, what we see clinically, if you have high catecholamines, if you're prone to anxiety, if you're prone to training at 5 p.m. and you can't calm yourself down, it's midnight and you're still jacked, like you had a bunch of coffee and you can't turn your brain off. Those are a couple characteristics. Chronic pain is often a characteristic of people with high catecholamines. Tachycardia, rapid heartbeat. These are the common patterns. You need to know that that's your tendency, because you can start to coordinate your nutrition, your supplementation, even your training cycle to honor your genetics. And so thinking about what we've talked about, I know we've jumped around a bit, and it is such a big subject, but really I think the takeaway, the genetic piece isn't the only book you need to read, but it's a really important chapter in why things happen, right?
Yes.
Understanding why things happen, that's a fun experience. It's a fun journey to figure that out. Then you go, oh, wow, I can set myself up for so much greater success now that I know that my tendency is to go low dopamine. So I'm going to make sure I take tyrosine. I'm going to take a lot of extra B vitamin support because I need that extra methylation support. Otherwise, my muscles will break down. So as a kinesiologist, we know that 1,000 times out of 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000 times, we know that the adrenal glands are going to reflex off of your adductors, like your gracilis, your sartorius, also your gastroc and your tib posterior. So when you run out of dopamine and you run out of adrenaline and you're a runner and you have 5 miles behind you and 2 miles left, your gait changes and you set yourself up for an injury because you've burned everything up.
Interesting. Yeah. It's just amazing, the kinesiology perspective and applied kinesiology into that. It's just another tool to kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
My rule is don't be bored. So whatever you have to not be bored, do that, and you'll have a smile on your face and you'll help people some way. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has something they're good at. Solving problems and trying to find connections in these things. That's what I'm best at. So that's what we're doing. Why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah. So your book, I'll put the links in the show notes, but because we're running out of time already. The protocols, you have a chapter on each thing, and then there's a great protocol section, end of the chapter, and I love summarizing it because you get so much information, then you have good analogies as you've given on the show today. But then what do you do about it? And protocols if you're, high or low in something, and then how to figure out what supplements to take. But let's go kind of first how people get started in getting their genetic data. If it's 23andMe and then they upload it to what you suggest a program, kind of talk about that and how we can get more information.
Yeah, great. So to hack your health, and all these instructions are in the book if you want to get that as a reference, but to hack your health, 23andMe was the standard for a long time. There's some questions about it. The owner of 23andMe is married to the founder of Google. People feel feel like there's privacy issues out there, and I would agree with them that there are. So Ancestry DNA has kind of stepped forward. They're kind of the leading edge now for this. They're less expensive. I recommend using a fake name unless if you're concerned about privacy, use a fake name. You're not under oath. You can call yourself whatever you want and get your data. And so you pay the company to generate a file of the raw data, which again goes over my head. It's all kinds of genetic gobbledygook. You can't even read it. It's like computer code. That file is what you pay them for.
Yes.
You download that file and you upload it to my friend, my colleague, someone I respect a lot, Sterling Hill. She's kind of the fountainhead for all this work on genetics. Most people copy her because she's the leader. And her company produces a report that's easy to read, costs $30. So your total out of pocket's about $130. Takes about 5 weeks to get the genetics back and takes about 5 minutes to get your report once you get the file. And then you have a workable manuscript, or you have your roadmap of what you're dealing with genetically. And that's what we work off of. You can start to see your tendencies and where you have areas of strengths and weaknesses once you have that in your hand. So
what's her website? To get the raw data, where to upload the raw data? Is it Sterling Hill?
It's going to be mthfr support.com.
That's what I was trying to find that. Okay. Now, do you do the saliva test for the genetic a few times to make sure it's accurate, that it's always the same, or have you ever kind of tested that out?
That's an excellent question. I've done mine twice. And it's been accurate both times. I mean, I don't know of a single test on earth that's accurate 100% of the time, but I think, it's almost like their technology is so complex and it's so obscured. I put my blinders on and I assume that what I get on the report is what I'm dealing with. And it's really masked up clinically really well.
Yeah, because I put my data into a few different reports. I'm going to test this out. So I haven't done this one before. That's why I was trying to find it. But yeah, I was just interested in saying, okay, if I take the same raw data and upload it into 4 different websites, or what I was asking before is okay, if I did 3 different saliva samples, is it going to give me the same genetic report?
I love that idea, Debbie. And please tell me what you find, because I think it would be, it would be good information. But Sterling Hill, just as you've done and as many of us have done, we've been sick and we've gotten better. She had to figure this out on her own. She figured this out way before I was even paying attention to it. So I trust her report. I've read it I've seen 500-600 of these. It's the gold standard. All the other reports out there, they charge you more and give you less. I'm like, I don't want anybody else to interpret it. I just want it to be in an easily to read format, and then we go from there. So
got it.
She's got the best one.
Okay, I'll check that out because I just was pulling mine up. The Strategene, and there's another one.
So Strategene is just the Cliff Notes version to what you get for less money with Sterling, right? So I mean, Not to knock Ben Lynch's operation, he's got his own thing going on, but you get way more data for less money going through Sterling Hill's organization. And there's one other gene I want to mention too, really fast. There's a creatine gene, okay? Some people have really hard time building muscle, even when they train perfectly and eat perfectly. It's called GAMT. When you do your report, if you have GAMT, 1 copy, yellow, or 2 red, creatine should be part of your daily routine. No questions asked.
Let's see that one. Genetic Genie I did too. I just was pulling that up. Okay. All right. So that's a good supplement to add in if you're not building muscle. Because I know a lot of people I've trained, that's why I created the holistic method 5 years ago and trying to speak about it more, because people exercise and they're like, okay, not changing at all, or want to lose fat and have a little muscle definition, but everyone responds differently. And so it's kind of fun to see your genetics, how they take into play. And that's why I did DNA Fit as well as another program I was looking at. So just comparing that everyone's so different how you respond to the same workout. That's why there isn't one size fits all approach to anything, because you are so individual and your genetics take into play for sure in how you train, how you fuel, how you perform in daily life. And if you want to work on that longevity parks, which I keep speaking of, it's not just our races this year, but am I looking out what I'm doing 20, 30 years from now? Like you said, the high schoolers, if they could just, know what you know now, what you did back then, and how to really train smartly and not damage yourself for 10 years from now, have these problems show up.
I mean, not to be biased, but I'm as a father of 3 young kids and a business owner and just a really busy human, I'm more inspired by people who are a little more mature and have built and been part of the world and had more responsibility than like somebody who's just like somebody who has little responsibility and all they have is just to train all the time. I mean, that's an inspiring story, but I just find I can relate more to people who juggle a lot of things and still come out with a great athletic body and great performance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I haven't announced this, but I did register for my first triathlon next year. And so this is going to be my test. Can I stay healthy and do a race that it's like, all right, I don't want to tell people because they'll judge me. Like, oh, should you be doing that? You screwed yourself up before. But just how to take this genetics and train differently than I did in the past, how I can really get the supplementation I need, and knowing my own genetics now, my genetic SNPs, and how I need to support more methyl B complex and glutathione and have creatine if I need it, and make sure I'm getting the mitochondria to perform the best and not damage myself.
I think there's a lot of us out there who want to be healthy, strong at 59 and 65 without chronic degenerative joint diseases and other problems. And when I meet people that have achieved that, that's the goal for me, right? I mean, today is great, but I want to be doing this as you do. I think the best times are still in front of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I think be healthier and thrive and feel alive more in our future, not feel like, oh, I just had my 30th high school reunion last weekend too. So it's kind of funny. It's like, I feel better now than I did the last 10-year reunion. And I think it's looking at, as you age, improve the aging process, not like blame getting older to feel crappy. And that's my biggest pet peeve is, oh, I'm getting older. This is how it is. I'm like, oh my God.
Okay. That is a very good point. And if that internal conversation does more damage than any food that we eat. It's really to ourselves. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I better wrap it up. I could talk to you for hours. So I know we should send your show links. We'll put everything into the podcast episode down below. And also you have some services you offer. And once I finish my FDN program this fall, you are on my list for next year, the practitioner program you have, to learn more from you, how to apply this to our clients. I'm excited to dive deeper in with you on this personally as a coach and practitioner, but how can just people want to get healthier, find your book, and let's share your website videos. Because the videos are great for indoor training on a bike in the wintertime when it's raining or cold out. We don't really get cold in Seattle, but rain, they work great for keeping entertained on a spin bike.
Exercise, release brain-derived neurotrophic factor, make new synaptic connections, and at the same time. That's one reason why you're so smart, Debbie, is you train and learn together. They go together very well. So.
If at low heart rates, wintertime.
At low heart rates.
Maffetone.
Awesome.
So yeah. So what's your website we want to send them to?
Yeah. So the research on methylation and nutrition is called Beyond MTHFR. Mm-hmm. And then we have an in-office clinic of a different name in Boise, Idaho, and that is Red Mountain Natural Medicine. So that's kind of the brick and mortar store operation. And then you have Beyond MTHFR. That's the YouTube and internet-based education machine. So.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much. And we'll get everyone to get their ancestor DNA, put the link for that, and take that data to Sterling Hill's website, the MTHFR. I didn't really realize what it stood for. And I'm reading the Plant Paradox book, Dr. Grundy, and he was saying mother effer. That's how you think of it. Your mother effer. I was like, oh, that's kind of how its initials looks like. So mthfrsupport.com and get your YouTube videos. And, if you want more information, you can sign up for consulting online coaching to get help. And all your supplements too are listed in the protocols in the book and where to order those as well. Very
good. Yep. And I hope this was valuable to some of you out there who are looking for that edge or just looking also not even for an edge, but for maybe a ladder out of a hole. And this is a great, great thing to study. It enriches your life, whether you're trying to recover from something chronic or just be a better version of who you are. Maybe your loved ones need to hear this message too. So it's a fun topic. It does help people. So
good. Well, if you guys have questions, you can go to debbiepots.net website and we can find another time to episode to answer your questions in the future this fall. But just, get this information. I've changed my life just putting this all together. Again, it's pieces of the puzzle together. So it's not just one thing. We treat everything and specifically and help heal, rebuild, and recover for performance and longevity. So training the whole athlete is what we're talking about. So this is great information to share with other athletes and your family, as you said. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this topic.
You're very welcome, Debbie. It's been a pleasure. And let's do it again sometime. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.